Man, it feels like the basketball world got hit with one of the greatest earthquakes of all time because the Luka Doncic being traded to the Los Angeles Lakers by the Dallas Mavericks for Anthony Davis is truly one of the biggest mind-blowing news that we've gotten dating back to whether you want to talk about even just free agency with Kevin Durant joining the Golden State Warriors or Paul George and Kawhi Leonard going to the Los Angeles Clippers and Paul George being traded there and the big draft haul that happened in that deal. This is truly one of the biggest ground earth-swelling moments that we've had in NBA history. And it's insane to think about the thought process of how we got here because let's talk about this specifically in this video from the Dallas Mavericks point of view, right? You're fresh off of an NBA Finals appearance where you get there, you lose to the Boston Celtics, you're 3 games away from winning a possible NBA championship, and you're that close that you feel like next year you come back, and in many people's eyes, you could be one of the legitimate contenders to go back and make a run at trying to win an NBA championship. Now, maybe in the Mavericks' eyes, Luka Doncic suffering a calf strain this season and being out since Christmas really delayed and impacted their projections for themselves going into the playoffs. And for them, what the rationale that you hear coming out of Dallas is that they were worried about making a long-term commitment to Luka due to his health issues and his commitment to being in shape and his conditioning. Reports from ESPN say that Luka had gotten to the ballpark of 270 pounds. And so the Mavericks were in position to be able to offer Luka Doncic a $300 million plus 5-year supermax extension with the Mavericks. And truth be told, those are the type of deals that once a player signs, they're locked into your franchise for Lord knows how long because supermax money is not easy to even move off of. Once a guy commits, it's a big deal on both sides. The player gets the money, but the franchise is also committing to that player and ensuring that that player is going to be the franchise cornerstone of that team for the next 5 to whatever amount of years that extension is doable for. So now you're in a situation with the Mavericks where they're sitting there and they're evaluating their prospects, seeing how Luka struggled in the postseason last year against the Celtics in the finals. They definitely made him a target. He was attacked a lot of the times in the postseason. Luka's never been known as a great defender. But when you come to the thought process from the Mavericks, I think they think that if they can uplift their defense despite the offensive shortcomings that they might have now without Luka being present, that they lifted the floor of their defense so high that now that they will defensively be a top-tier contender and also have a legitimate go-to option in Anthony Davis as well as Kyrie Irving. Now, if you want my pure thoughts, I truly don't understand how you get to this point as the Mavericks. I get it. I think that you wanting to commit that type of money to a person is a lot. But when that person has shown you, even when we talked about Luka's weight in past seasons and him not being in the best conditioning and all that, he still put up MVP caliber seasons and led the Mavericks to places they haven't been since Dirk Nowitzki. And while they fell short of a championship last year, it feels like such a wide gap on the terrain where you go from being an NBA Finals contender to then now you're saying that we have to move off that guy because you don't trust him to be able to do that for you consistently. And especially at the age of 25 years old, the Mavericks are making this move and landing a 31-year-old Anthony Davis. And from that perspective, I am just baffled because so many teams wish they could get a guy like Luka Doncic. For years, I think it's easy to say Luka Doncic is a consensus top 3 player in the NBA. Whether you want to shuffle the guys around between him, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, normally you're going to have the conversation around those 3 players. And SGA is now trying to edge his way in from the top 5 best players in the NBA into that conversation, right? But in terms of consistency and guys who have been at it and put on display, those are the 3 players that we talk about who right now go to any franchise, they change the whole shape of the conference. And I think that now when you make this move as the Mavericks, your window is entirely shorter. You now have to win within the next 4 to 5 years, I would say. If that, it might actually be 2 to 3 years because Kyrie Irving is over the age of 32. Anthony Davis is going to be 32 this year in March. And so now when you're looking at that shortening window, Pelinka-Harrison, funny enough, even in his press conference after this trade, makes a comment about the fact that him and Jason Kidd might not be here. Somebody might have to put them in a grave and stuff like that.
Short term makes great sense. How do you see this working out well for the organization in the long term?
Well, I think the long term is the time frame. I think he fits our time frame. If you pair him with Kyrie and the rest of the guys, he fits right along with our time frame to win now and win in the future. And the future to me is 3-4 years from now. The future 10 years from now, I don't know. I don't think they probably bury me and Jay by then, or we bury ourselves.
Yes.
I guess that is the way this move is operating. You are entirely saying, forget the future. We are entirely bought in, and you think this deal gives you the best chance to win now. But the weird thing is, though, Luka also was giving you one of the best chances to win now in that situation. That team was built to win now. You didn't even run the full course of a Luka, Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving, spearheaded ship along with Derek Lively and Gafford and so on. It's just it's odd to just bail on it from this vantage point and to do it what feels like so early in what could have been a championship run at least one of the next few years, right? But now you're essentially you are still hoping that Kyrie. This puts a lot of faith on Kyrie Irving to be the main ball distributor and shot creator for your team, along with Anthony Davis. Granted, this allows Anthony Davis to now return to his true position of the 4, but I don't know. It's mind-boggling to me. And then I'm even more confused about the fact when you get more details and whether they reached out to one other team or whatever the case might be, the fact that this wasn't made league-wide known that Luka was available. Now, I understand there's some perspective here that you can add, but just on the broad strokes, if you would have had a league-wide auction for Luka Doncic's services, teams would have been throwing in deals that you can't even imagine. Especially, I imagine the San Antonio Spurs would have been willing to part with many of their young pieces as well as many draft picks, right? Because Luka Doncic and Wemby pairing, that would have been incredible. Especially if we're sitting here talking about De'Aaron Fox and the Spurs. A Luka and Wemby pairing, that would have been sensational. They would have been easily contenders for the next 10 years in the Western Conference. But now you're talking about a situation where the Lakers are apparently their primary deal that they wanted to get, and I guess I understand it from this vantage point. They knew the player they wanted. And if they talked to one other team, the one other team I would have suspected they talked to about making a deal, especially because Pelinka-Harrison has been obviously big on defense. In the quote that he gave after this, when many people reached out to him, he said that I believe defense wins championships, and he thinks that this position they're now in with Anthony Davis puts them in a better position defensively, and adding Max Christie. Don't want to leave out those other pieces as part of the deal, but getting a young guy that can be a good, solid two-way starter in the NBA, Max Christie, who's cheap right now, he's young, he shoots well from 3, he knows how to play defense, and you get that first-round pick from the Lakers, but they wanted a guy that would play great defense and uplift their defense, and the only other team I can imagine that had a guy that would even be within discussion of Luka, you knew the Spurs weren't going to do Wemby, right? There was no hope with that, but the only other guy would have been Giannis. That's the only other player I can imagine they called, and all the different comments Giannis has made over the last few years talking about the fact that he wants to be on a team contending for championships and all that stuff. That's the only player that comes to mind that I think offensively can even though he's not as good as Luka offensively, he's still a great player offensively. He's one of the top 5, top 10 best players offensively, and then defensively, Giannis is easily a top 3 player in the NBA. So when you're talking about it from that vantage point, I that's the only other team I could have thought they did. But because they knew who they wanted, and they also, I don't think they wanted to leak out from whether it would have been Clutch Sports on the LeBron and Anthony Davis and Rich Paul side of things, depending on how they would have received the trade. I don't know if they wanted to then leak it, if they didn't want it to get out. Apparently, Rich Paul knew days beforehand, though, according to Chris Haynes.
I'm going to take you behind the scenes a little bit. I was told the Mavericks initiated this. They contacted the Lakers, and I was told that the Lakers reached out to Rich Paul after the inquiry from the Dallas Mavericks.
Anthony Davis and LeBron, I don't know when. Apparently, LeBron found out right after the Lakers beat the Knicks in similar fashion to everybody else, according to Dave McMenamin. So in some ways, there's a few conflicting reports there, depending on, unless Rich Paul just didn't tell LeBron and he just didn't tell Anthony Davis, whatever the case might be. But apparently, Rob Pelinka, after the trade was made on the Lakers side, his first calls were to J.J. Redick, and a conference call with J.J. Redick and Anthony Davis, letting them know. The next call was to Rich Paul, and the next call after that was to LeBron James. So take with that what you will, what you believe what the scenario is that what happened there. But when that happens, I'm just surprised because if the trade would have gone out, you would imagine the asking price from the Lakers would have got risen up by the Mavericks, and that's one of the surprising things. So I think because the Mavericks wanted Anthony Davis, they didn't want the chance that if other teams found out the Lakers were also willing to move Anthony Davis, that now you risk that the asking price from the Lakers, or the Lakers might entertain a better price or something. There's no better offer than Luka Doncic. I'm sorry. Unless another team was going to tell you, hey, do you want Nikola Jokic? Do you want Giannis Antetokounmpo? There really was no other better offer the Lakers could have gotten than from Luka Doncic. Like, on the Lakers side of things, which I'll make a video talking about the Lakers perspective, but it was as clear as day what you're doing there. But that's the only way I can imagine that the Mavericks didn't want the Lakers to get any other calls or something like that from anybody else as well, because despite there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on about Anthony Davis. I don't even know if people actually watch Anthony Davis play and watch the Lakers play. But if you actually watch Anthony Davis and the Lakers play basketball, Anthony Davis is still a top 10 talent in basketball. Still, especially on a great night, Anthony Davis can be a top 5 talent in basketball when he's having one of his great offensive nights. And there's also nights defensively where you just can't even. it's unconscionable how good he is defensively at times, and that's what Nico Harrison is seeing. And you have that connection between Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka, where Nico Harrison used to be the Nike rep, and he was one of the guys that helped land Kobe with Nike, and Rob Pelinka was Kobe's former agent. So those guys already had those ties. So when they're having these trade discussions, you can see how you're able to keep things quiet just due to the relationship those two naturally had. But this is just so crazy. I think from the Dallas Mavericks standpoint of things, it's going to be interesting because you're in a scenario where you're going to run pretty much a twin tower. And Nico Harrison spoke to this, the Mavs GM. He said that they want to run a similar framework of what the Cavaliers have on the Mavericks, where you have the two big twin towers, but their bigs are actually flexible. Their bigs can switch out on the perimeter, and then their bigs don't leave you stranded in a situation where if one gets switched out on the perimeter and a guy is driving downhill to the rim, now you have Anthony Davis or you have Derek Lively there if you're AD to watch your back. AD having to play center all these years with the Lakers since literally they won the championship, he hasn't been happy about, and recently just asked for a trade in that scenario to try and get out of that. And that's where I guess I understand how the Mavericks are thinking that defensively they're going to be a much better team in terms of protecting the rim and keeping guys deterred from wanting to attack the basket. It's interesting because the Mavericks really being worried about Luka's health is an interesting prospect to me, because Anthony Davis, even though he's been good the last few years in terms of being healthy and being able to play games, he has dealt with injuries, right, in the past, as well as Kyrie Irving. And these guys are already on the bad side of 30 in terms of where their careers are in this current point in time. So I'm very curious about where the Mavericks feel. You can kind of feel as though now we're going to start getting the stories about what really was going on behind the scenes between the Mavericks and Luka Doncic and the communication and stuff like that, because it feels as though there's this more to this story, that a weight concern doesn't lead to you trading a top 3 player in the NBA that just got you to the NBA Finals, mind you, just got you there. It just doesn't add up, especially if you feel like you could have got. A lot of people are looking at this deal and feeling like you could have got more from the Lakers, if anything. That doesn't even take into account the other teams you could have reached out to and shopped around for to raise the asking price up from the Lakers, if that's the case. But regardless, I mean, this is a crazy deal. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. This is raw recording. I don't even have any stats pulled up. This is just raw, wow. Give me your thoughts down in the comments, guys.